Thank you, everybody. Really thrilled to be back with you. I've been on faculty for NextMed since 2016, and I've learned a lot from Daniel in the 25 years that he and I have been friends. And one thing is to think big thoughts about the future, and the other is to speak really fast with a bunch of slides. On this stage, in past years, I've spoken a lot about the future of genetic engineering, and specifically human genetic engineering, which is what my book, Hacking Darwin, was about. And in those talks, I said, what I believe is that we are entering a new era where our one species among all the species that has ever lived suddenly has the increasing ability to read, write, and hack the code of life. And that, as I said, was going to have profound implications for the future of humans and the future of everything. And on this stage, I predicted that was coming soon, genome-edited babies. In that and in my book, Hacking Darwin, I predicted that it would happen in China, and I had a list of the 5 genes that I thought were most likely to be manipulated that were in that book. And then, as many of you remember, on November 28, 2018, this is He Jiankui, Chinese biophysicist, who at the Second International Summit on Human Genome Editing announced, to the shock of almost everybody in the room, that the world's first CRISPR babies had been born. It was a shock. Everybody knew that this was coming, but nobody knew, not many people knew, that it was going to come that soon. And I personally was extremely pissed off for one selfish reason and one cosmic reason. The selfish reason was that my book, the hard copy version of my book, Hacking Darwin, was already on its way to the printers. And in that book, again, I had said this is happening, it's happening soon, it's going to happen in China, and I'd listed the genes, but even I didn't think it was going to happen in 2018. And so I called my publisher and I said, I've got bad news and good news. The bad news is we have to pull the book out of publication. The good news is we don't, for the hardback version, we don't need to make many edits. We just need to say that this thing that I've predicted had happened on this day, and then we can make changes in the next edition, which we did. But on a cosmic level, the reason why I was so upset is that this is a profound step for humanity. Our species and all species have evolved for a little under 4 billion years. And if we are going to take the step of beginning to manipulate our heritable genome, that's a pretty profound step, and it needs to be done carefully, cautiously, conservatively, and in consultation with each other. This is a step that humanity was taking, and I felt this was highly unethical, an unethical step. But the reason why that I had predicted, and I think many people in this room share this idea, that we were going to have all of these coming quickly, is connected to the name of this event, whether it's exponential or next. But this idea of change, all of the speakers have spoken about this idea of change, but I want to talk a little bit about what I mean by it and why I think this idea of accelerating change is so profound. Most of you are, I'm sure, familiar with the alphas. 2016, AlphaGo beat Lee Sedol, the world's greatest player at the time in the game of Go. People thought it was going to be decades until a AI system could beat human at Go because of the complexity of that game. But what AlphaGo had done essentially was swallow up the digitized games of Go masters. So it was kind of unfair that Lee Sedol was playing against all of the human Go masters. They were concentrated through the lessons learned in this AlphaGo program. 2017, AlphaZero, which was only fed the rules of Go and played against itself, and it took 3 days of playing against itself to get to the point where it could beat AlphaGo. The next year, 2018, the same company, DeepMind, had its new program, AlphaFold, which was designed to try to solve one of the greatest problems in biology, which is predicting the shapes of proteins based on the strings of amino acids. And as everybody knows, the way a protein functions isn't just based on its sequence, it's based on its shape. And they came in 18th place in the protein folding competition in 2018, went back to the drawing board. 2020 re-entered the competition and won so handedly that Nature said that the problem of predicting proteins had been solved, which is a huge step for biology. And so so in the process of characterizing a single protein, if you're characterizing a protein in a lab using X-ray crystallography, which until then was kind of the state of the art, it takes about 3 to 5 years to characterize a single protein. Let's call it 3 years. Lots of PhD theses, lots of postdocs focus on doing that. And so if you just say there are about 230 million proteins known to science, if you did it the old-fashioned way to try to characterize them all, that's 690 million years. So the next year, 2021, DeepMind, through AlphaFold, released the predicted shapes of 350,000 proteins, including all of the proteins in the human body, and that was a very big deal. And then the next year, which was last year, released 220 million of those proteins. And so if you take the 220 million times the 3 years to characterize all of those proteins, that's 660 million years thrown back into the pot of human creativity. There are people who say, well, humans are going to be displaced. I don't think that's the case at all. We have always, at least for all of modern history, we have co-evolved with our tools. And when our tools do something, that frees us to do something else. But earlier, Alfred was talking about GitHub. And he showed the example of typing the computer code, and then GitHub was just suggesting the next line of code. And he said, well, it's 50% faster to write computer code. When we add up all of these things that we would have previously done, and we throw that time back into the pot of human creativity, and it's not just human creativity, but it's human creativity empowered by these incredible tools, it makes me extremely excited about what we humans, if we get it right, what we humans and our AI systems and other technologies have the potential, if we do it right, to do together. And all of this translates into pretty much every field of science. We're talking about genome editing here, the incredible story, the incredible progress. In 2009, zinc finger nuclease was like the big story for genome editing. 2011, there was the new method TALENs, and they thought, wow, TALENs is really incredible. In the journal Nature Medicine, called TALENs the method of the year in 2011. Don't ever get the method of the year award, because it means you're going to get screwed the next year, because 2012 was when Jennifer Doudna and Emmanuel Charpentier had their later Nobel Prize-winning paper outlining CRISPR. And then people thought, wow, people were all excited about CRISPR. And then 2016 base editing, 2019 prime editing. You get where this is going. Every one of these technologies that we think, wow, this is the coolest thing ever, it ends up that technology is Pong. The coolest thing, ChatGPT 3 is Pong. ChatGPT 4, it's coming. That's Pong too, because when Pong happened, I remember in my basement in Kansas City, it was the coolest thing ever. We weren't comparing Pong to ChatGPT 4. We were comparing Pong to Pong. So every technology is the top of some old pyramid, and it's the bottom of the next pyramid. This is just the same story. It's almost like Pac-Man. You see these little Pac-Mans going through these technologies, and really we could be talking about anything. We're talking about genome editing. We could be talking about really any field at the intersection of genetics, biotech, and AI. And so what we're seeing, and again, I'm using the Daniel Kraft model because he's only given me 15 minutes to talk about all of this, is we're moving up the food chain, and we're moving back and forth in the time chain for the things that we are editing and considering editing, starting with model organisms, but moving up, and now, of course, the human applications. And these are what I call the easy, hard things. Like the easy, hard things are kind of the no-brainer applications for humans. Certainly, the research applications of genetic technologies and genome editing, knocking out or knocking in different genes to figure out what they do. Then there's the somatic gene therapies, which are exploding. And the gene therapies, as you know, like all of these technologies, there's summers followed by winters, followed by summers and springs, and all of the seasons. So now we are in the spring where there is a huge chain of gene therapies that are being applied, starting with the more accessible parts of the body. It's estimated 13 new gene therapies will be approved this year. That number is going to tick up every year. There's 2,000 clinical trials. Around 200 of them are in phase 3. So we're going to be entering this era where more and more gene therapies are going to be applied to humans. I talked about the 2018 Second International Summit on Human Genome Editing. This is a picture from last week at the Third International Summit on Human Genome Editing, which was held in London. And the cloud of He Jiankui, the dark cloud of He Jiankui, hovered over that last meeting in Hong Kong. But the bright cloud of this woman, Victoria Gray, was what illuminated the experience last week. Here was her words on Victoria Gray. I'm a 37-year-old mother of 4 and a sickle cell survivor. During this hospital stay, when she was being treated with the old ways, with ketamine infusion in one arm and a dilaudid infusion in the next, but still no pain relief, I called all the doctors into the room and told them that I could no longer live like this. I went home and continued to pray and look to God for answers. And then she got this treatment with the gene therapy. And then she said, the life that I once felt like I was only existing in, I am now thriving in. I stand here before you today as proof that miracles still happen and that God and science can coexist. When we talk about these technologies and people get scared, people say, oh, maybe we should shut this whole thing down because we're entering this new phase and humans are assuming these godlike capabilities. But we need to remember that these are technologies that have unlimited potential to do good. Asterisk. We'll come back to that. So this is just a quick thing of gene therapies for human applications. We're kind of in the middle, but I was in Kyoto recently talking about universal donor cell therapies, which is basically an idea for taking the cost down by making the applications more shareable, personalized therapies. All of this is on this same exponential curve of technological advancement and human and other applications. So let me talk for a moment on the promises of heritable human genome editing. One is to eliminate some heritable diseases. Germline, heritable genome editing, is not the cure for everything. But what I think what we should want is to say there will be an optimal time to treat everything. And some things will be optimally and most effectively treated at the stage of pre-implanted embryo, or even prior to pre-implanted embryo at the sperm or egg stage. Something will be in fetal surgery, some things will happen after birth, and some things will happen later in life. This question of therapy versus enhancement, it's kind of an easy shorthand that is wrong, that people say, well, I'm comfortable with therapy, I'm not comfortable with enhancement. Therapy and enhancement are cultural constructs. They're part of the same continuum, and we're going to have to suffer. We're going to have to struggle with questions of what is okay and what is not okay. I've written the whole book, and I've spoken here many times in the past on assisted reproduction. But we're entering an age where fewer and fewer of us are going to reproduce through the physical act of sex. We will still be sexually reproducing species, but we are going to want to bring more science into the reproduction process. So in the beginning, so we can reduce the threat of harmful diseases, dangerous abnormalities. But over time, again, because there's no clear line between therapy and enhancement, we're going to have to struggle with what is okay and what is not okay. What are some of the enhancements that we will want? Disease resistance, increased health span, maybe athletic ability, cosmetic, climate resistance, living in space, which we're not optimized to do. And over time, if our species wants to survive, we know this planet is not going to survive, so we're going to have some different biologies in order to do so. I mentioned my book. Chris Mason has this wonderful book, The Next 500 Years. But very, very real dangers. I'll just talk about a couple. Complexity. What we're talking about is very complex systems, ecosystems that have evolved over nearly 4 billion years. However much we know very, very, very little. Diversity, we think of diversity in the context of our universities and workplaces, but diversity is the sole survival strategy of our species. When Darwin talks about random mutation and natural selection, diversity is that random mutation. And there are very big challenges. This is me testifying last week in the United States Congress on COVID origins, but I believe there is a through line between the CRISPR baby story and the COVID story, at least with my analysis of what I think is the most likely origin, and that is these godlike technologies and capabilities connected to national politics in places like China. And so if we don't recognize that there are very, very real threats, we're going to be in danger. So after the He Jiankui debacle, there were all kinds of conversations about fears and where is humanity going. Of course, fears lead to reports. There were lots of reports, including, and then there was this commission that I had the honor of serving on, created by Dr. Tedros after the announcement of the CRISPR babies. And we worked for 2 years, and very, very hard. We came up with these recommendations, and I encourage you to go to the website, but lots of the really well thought out recommendations. The problem is what to do with those recommendations. We could give them to the WHO, but the WHO itself doesn't have much power. We have a world where different countries have their own regulatory systems, where there's no structure in place to bring different countries together, and so we're all kind of on our own. And that connects to this broader issue that our science is global in our interconnected world, and the consequences and the benefits of science are global, but we don't have a system for managing that new reality of our world. The greatest challenge we face in our world today is that the big problems we face are global and common in nature, but we don't have a framework for addressing that entire category of problems. That's the idea for One Shared World, which is our global interdependence movement. And it's connected to what we're doing here. I mean, some of you may be working in just an individual physician's office or in universities, but everything is connected. We are all part of these interconnected ecosystems, and therefore we each have a role. And that's my core message, is wherever you fit in this ecosystem, you have a responsibility to do what you are doing as ethically and carefully, as mindfully as possible, but also to be contributing at every other level, on your professional level, on a regional level, on a national level, and on a global level. So again, I had to do a Daniel because I just have a little bit of time. This is it's called a conflictizement. And thank you very, very much, and I hope to see you all later tonight. All right.
So not only you are a futurist and One Shared World founder, you are also titled and licensed as a chocolate shaman. So one of the fun things we're going to be doing tonight around 9 o'clock.
It's a self-licensure
cacao shaman. And
that we all too can get a PhD on YouTube on?
If you can just show up and I will dub you an official cacao shaman.
Cacao has a lot of medical benefits, which we'll talk about later.
Yes.
So join us in the Cornet Room at 9 for Jamie and some fun and games and the cacao ceremony. So don't miss that.